Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you're watching this video lecture. Today, let us discuss about Accounting Standard 19 that is related to leases. The objective of this standard is to prescribe naturally for both lessor as well as lessee appropriate accounting policies as well as disclosures in relation to finance leases and operating leases. So, as the objective itself states, at a broader level, we can classify the leases into two categories. One is finance lease, second one is operating lease. What is the meaning of each of them? We will discuss this as part of AS 19. And not only that, for both the types of leases, we will discuss about accounting treatment in the books of lessors also and lessees also. Naturally, lessor is the one who is the legal owner of the asset, who conveys the other party lessee the right to use an asset for an agreed period of time. That's what is the basic definition of lease. So, lease is an agreement wherein the lessor, who is the legal owner of the asset, what is doing? Lessor is conveying a right. So, lessor is conveying a right to use the asset. To whom he is conveying? He is conveying it to the lessee, the other party. But what is the consideration that the lessor gets by conveying this right to the lessee? Naturally, he will get a payment or even a series of periodic payments, which we can call them as lease rentals. And this right is conveyed by the lessor to the lessee for an agreed period of time. We can call that lease term. So, in this first slide itself, we can understand various terms here. Broadly, the leases can be classified into finance leases and operating leases. Then, the parties involved in a lease are, one is lessor, the other one is lessee. These are the two parties. The consideration for which this lease contract has been entered into can be called as lease rental or lease payments, whatever the name may be. And the term during which the asset is supposed to be used by the lessee can be called as the lease term. The period during which the lessee gets the right to use asset, and that right has been conveyed by lessor to the lessee. Of course, in return, the lessee will give the lessor lease rentals. Generally, periodically, that payment will happen. That's what is basically a lease all about. Of course, when we say a lease, in both cases, whether it is a finance lease or an operating lease, this characteristics of a lease is common. But in order to call a particular lease as a finance lease, certain conditions have to be satisfied according to AS 19. We have to check those things. Then only we will understand what is a finance lease, and naturally whatever is not a finance lease, that becomes an operating lease. AS 19 prescribes how to identify a finance lease only. Operating lease separately need not be defined. Whichever lease is not a finance lease, automatically that becomes an operating lease. And we will discuss about what does constitute a finance lease in this discussion about AS 19 as well. But before that, let us also understand the exceptions of AS 19. In other words, this standard can be only applied for accounting of all the leases other than, means in the following cases, for the following situations, AS 19 is not applicable. In the following cases, it is not applicable. What are those cases? This can be a theory question. Lease agreements to explore for or the use of natural resources like oil, gas, timber, metals, mineral rights, etc. Same way, licensing agreements for the items like motion picture films or video recordings or plays or manuscripts or patents or copyrights. No, this standard does not apply to them. Those are mostly falling under intangible assets. And this standard does not apply to lease agreement for using lands. So this is excluded from AS 19's purview. And not only that, the agreements which are the contracts for services but do not transfer any right to use the assets, those are also not covered by AS 19 because that is only a contract for services that does not transfer any right to use the assets separately, which means those are not having any characteristics of lease. That is why those type of agreements are also not covered by AS 19. In a nutshell, agreements for usage of natural resources, agreements for intangible assets, agreements for usage of lands, agreement for services are not covered by AS 19. AS 19 covers only when there is a transfer of right to use the assets other than those assets which are mentioned in this list. That is the scope of this AS 19. Actually, we can say the exclusions from the scope of AS 19 are these 4 items as per AS 19. Now coming to the core aspect of what is a finance lease. When can we say a particular lease is a finance lease? AS 19 tells the situations under which a lease can be called as a finance lease. The basic definition of finance lease is that it is a lease which transfers substantially, not fully, but substantially, all the risks and rewards incidental to the ownership of an asset. Title may or may not be eventually be transferred. So, legally speaking, lessor is the owner still of the asset. But the lessor has substantially transferred all the risks and rewards incidental to the ownership of such asset. Title of that asset may or may not be transferred in future, but still such lease can be called as a finance lease. So substantially all risks and rewards incidental to the ownership of the asset, if they are transferred, such a lease can be called as finance lease. What can be the testing points, we can say, are situations where we can call a lease as finance lease. Some of them are prescribed in the standard, some of them are given as examples. Let us look at them one by one. This is an important discussion. Why? Because there are problems given in the earlier examinations, questions, wherein he will give different types of transactions and he will ask you to identify whether such lease is a finance lease or an operating lease, with a reason, of course. So while explaining that reason, you have to write these things. That is why you should remember this very well. The definition of finance lease and the circumstances under which a lease can be called as finance lease have to be remembered. First point, the lessee will get the ownership of the leased asset at the end of the lease term, if that is the case, according to the agreement, which is the lease agreement. After the end of the lease term, the lessee will get the ownership of the leased asset. If that is there in the agreement, that can be called as a finance lease. Second, if the lessee has an option to buy the leased asset at the end of the term, he has an option. He will not automatically get the ownership, but in this case, he has an option to buy the leased asset at the end of the term at a price which is lower than its expected fair value at the date on which the option will be exercised. In other words, after the end of the lease term, the lessee can buy the asset at a price which is lower than its expected fair value. If that is the case also, then such lease can be called as a finance lease. Third, if the lease term covers major part of the life of the asset, then also such a lease can be called as finance lease. Then, fourth point, which is going to be checked by us with calculations. Because point A, we can only check from the agreement whether the ownership will be transferred to the lessee after the lease term ends. How do we know that? It will be according to agreement. B point also will be according to the agreement that lessee might have an option after the end of the lease term to buy the asset at a very lesser price when compared with the expected fair value after the end of the lease term. Then that also is possible to be called as a finance lease, but that is also something to be looked at in the terms of the agreement. Lease term covers the major part of the life of the asset. That is also definitely according to the lease term. We can check that. This can be checked. Let us say an asset has 8 years life and it is leased for 7 years, let us say. Almost the entire life of the term or life of the asset is covered by the lease term. Then, as an example, we can say that is a finance lease. But D point is the one where we can check whether it is a finance lease or not with calculations, and that will be definitely asked in the exam questions for calculations also. So what is the D point? Read it and understand it carefully and remember it also. At the beginning of the lease term, present value of the minimum lease payments. This is what we should calculate. So we should know first of all what is minimum lease payments. We will come to that. And we should already know how to calculate present values. The time value of money, how to compute the present values, we should know. That is there in part of financial management anyway. But application of the DCF techniques will be required in this chapter also, because we are supposed to discount the minimum lease payments with a relevant discount factor and find out the present values of those minimum lease payments, and that should be first calculated and kept. And if that present value of minimum lease payment covers substantially the initial fair value of the leased asset, then also that lease can be called as finance lease. For understanding them, we should also look at why first of all we had to categorize these finance leases and operating leases. Intention. Okay, AS 19 classified it. This is finance lease. We know that we can definitely apply them. But what was the need for it? Not just AS 19, even international accounting standards, IFRS, US GAAP, in every country's accounting standards, this classification of leases has become important. Why is that? For that, we should understand what used to happen before introduction of these standards. Of course, none of our standards have been written by us. We should already know that. Those are all mostly taken from international accounting standards. Before introduction of those standards, what used to happen in the multinational organizations? What used to happen is, if an organization has a balance sheet and it has an asset on the balance sheet, then normally whatever the profit or loss that it gets will be in the numerator, and return on investment while it calculates, or return on assets while it calculates, the denominator will be huge. Numerator is same. Profits will be generated whether you use a owned asset or leased asset or whatever the asset may be. Asset is used and automatically the profit is generated. So if the asset was owned really by the enterprise, if it was owned, then return on investment and return on assets used to be low. Why? Because denominator is high. So what they started doing is, they started doing something called as making these items off balance sheet. How was that possible? They will not buy this asset, rather they will lease this asset from some lessor. There will be some other lessor organization from which this organization, the reporting organization, will take an asset on lease. And earlier, prior to this standard we are talking, because of that, what they used to do, they used to take this asset off the balance sheet, and of course they are supposed to pay the lease rentals, but that liability also was not there in the balance sheet. In other words, They used to make their balance sheets thinner and leaner, because of which the profits or the return on investment or return on assets will look like they are higher. But effectively, the organization as good as owns the assets, but only by the agreement which it has entered into with the lessor, that is the lease agreement. All that they used to do is they just used to debit the profit and loss accounts with the lease rentals as an expenditure, like any other rental. So, normally, if you look at it, there is nothing wrong with that. But intention is the problem. Intention is what? Intention is actually to own the asset only, but not to show it on my balance sheet. How would I own it? Legally, I will not own it. Legally, somebody else will own it, called as lessor. I will just take that asset on lease from that lessor. Almost for the entire life of that asset, I will only use. That means I am not showing this as a asset purchased. Rather, I am showing it as an asset which is being used, which becomes only a revenue item. No appearance in the balance sheet is there. So these items are all called off balance sheet items, which lot of multinationals used to do. And naturally, because of that, the financial statements were not reflecting the true and fair view of the financial performance and financial position. And the real state of affairs of that organization could not be identified from such distorted financial statements of many companies. So, how to bring them into the balance sheet? That is when the accounting standard setting bodies throughout the world have devised this word called as finance lease. Of course, in India we call it as finance lease. In US they call it as capital lease. It doesn't matter. Name is only difference. Ultimately, the effective meaning is same, more or less. So finance lease is now defined, and now the organizations are forced to bring this asset into the balance sheet, along with that a liability also. Which means they cannot escape this balance sheet presentation for the assets which they have taken on finance lease. Of course, if that lease is a genuine operating lease, then there is no problem. That will not come into balance sheet because you are not the owner of the asset. That will be just a expenditure in the form of lease rental getting paid to account. So operating lease is not an issue. Finance lease is an issue, wherein in essence the lessee really wanted to be the owner of the asset, but because of this one agreement, he is trying to make his assets and liabilities of the balance sheet. We don't know whether they are doing it intentionally or not. Nobody can go and ask them. Intentions cannot be checked. That is why only way how to bring them into the balance sheet is by setting a standard. So now we don't need any intentions and all. Simply we have to check the situation. Whether the lessee is going to get the ownership of the asset at the end of the lease term. If that is the case, it is a finance lease. Why? Because that is the intention of the lessee, which is clear from the agreement itself. He wants to be the owner, but just he is postponing the ownership. All these years he will take this asset off the balance sheet. We don't want to allow that. So we say, no, that is not possible. Now, because of AS 19, if that is a finance lease, it has to be brought to the balance sheet as an asset. How to calculate that? We will see that. First of all, point to be noted here is if it is a finance lease, it cannot be an off balance sheet item. That is the intention basically of defining finance lease and prescribing the conditions under which a particular lease can be called as finance lease. We don't need to look at the intentions of the people and all, good or bad and all. We don't know that. We don't have to do that. But as the standard says, that itself indicates definitely there is something wrong with that lease. It is not a normal rental agreement. It is something more than that. So that is the reason in all these cases we can say the lease is a finance lease. When the lessee gets the ownership of the leased asset at the end of the lease term, or when the lessee has an option to buy the leased asset at the end of the lease term at a price which is lower than its expected fair value. Why would we get that fantastic option from the lessor? Because he would have covered the differential in the lease payments itself. He is actually buying the asset. But instead, what is showing as if he is leasing that asset, lease rentals will be shown at a higher amounts. And at the end of the lease term, he will buy the asset and that too at a very lower price. So if that is the case, that is a finance lease. And if the lease term covers almost major part of the life of the asset, then also it is a finance lease. And D point is important for calculations also. If you take the present value of the minimum lease payments, that is almost substantially covering the initial fair value of the leased asset. So we are not taking the minimum lease payments only. We are taking the present value of the minimum lease payments. That itself is covering the initial fair value substantially. That means what? As good as the lessee is paying almost the fair value of the asset, almost, but not in one shot, but in installments. Of course, those installments might include interest also, but this is not a hire purchase or installment purchase. Don't mix with that. That is a different story altogether. We are talking about a lease, not a purchase. First understand that. Hire purchase is a different transaction altogether, where the hire purchaser has purchased the asset. Intention was clearly to purchase the asset only. So there is no problem with that. That is a different story altogether. But here, the asset is not purchased, it is leased by the lessee from the lessor. And lessee is paying to the lessor through multiple lease payments almost the entire initial fair value of the asset. That means as good as it is a purchase. But should we call it a purchase? No, we still cannot call it a purchase. We are only calling it a finance lease. So simple for understanding purposes, finance lease has a little bit of characteristics of a purchase, but it cannot be called as a purchase. It is as good as a purchase, but it is not a purchase, it is not deemed to be a purchase, it is just called as a finance lease. But it has little bit more characteristics of a purchase, if not now, in future, if not now, at the end of lease term, like that. So that is the essence or logic of all these points we can remember, but that will not give us marks. We have to write these words. When such a situation is presented to us, we cannot write all these stories. We have to write the exact words. When lessee will get the ownership of the leased asset at the end of the lease term, or if the lessee has an option to buy the leased asset at the end of the lease term at a price which is lower than the expected fair value of that asset, when that option could be exercised. When the lease term covers substantially major part of the life of the asset. At the beginning of the lease term, if the present value of minimum lease payments covers substantially the initial fair value of the leased asset, in all these cases it will be called as a finance lease. And fifth case is only a qualitative thing. The asset is given on lease to the lessee is of a specialized nature and can only be used by the lessee. Nobody else can use it. That itself means it is a kind of specialized asset which is given to the lessee. Nobody else can use it without major modification. That also indicates it is a finance lease. So these are the cases where the lessees could not take their lease off the balance sheet. They have to consider them as finance lease. Accordingly, they have to identify an asset also and a liability also. We discussed that about asset liability thing in the upcoming slides. But prior to that, we should clearly know what constitutes a finance lease. These are the 5 situations according to Accounting Standard 19 where the lease can be called as a finance lease. Are these the only 5 things, or can there be any other tests also? Possibly we can test other indicators as well. Let us say if the lessee has an option to cancel the lease and the lessor's losses associated with the cancellation are borne by the lessee. Why? Why would he bear that? If it is only finance lease, then only he will do that. So, cancellation of the lease almost giving the lessor the entire price. Whatever the loss that lessor will have to incur because of the cancellation of the lease will be borne by lessee. That means it is a finance lease. Also, if the gains or losses from the fluctuations in the residual value accrue to the lessee, for example, if the lessor agrees to allow the rent rebate equaling most of the disposable value of the leased asset at the end of the lease. So, the gains or losses from the fluctuations of residual value ideally should go to whom? The owner. Owner is who? Lessor. But no, if they are coming to lessee, that means something is wrong with that. That means it is a finance lease. Same way, if the lessee can continue the lease for a secondary period, so 4 years lease term is there, after that lessee has an option to renew that lease for a secondary period, that too at a rent which is substantially lower than the market rent. Why? Why would that be? Because probably in the first term itself, that differential would have been covered in the lease rentals. Probably. That is why we say, then also it is a finance lease. So simply speaking, these are the 8 points we can generally remember. 5 points directly given in the AS 19. 3 points for testing the indicators also, which are in addition to the original 5 points, where lessee bears the lessor's losses associated with the cancellation of lease, or where the losses or profits from fluctuation in the residual value accrue to the lessee, or where the lessee has an option to renew the lease at a rental much lesser than the market rent. In all those cases also we can call that as a finance lease. Very important conditions to be remembered, and we have to write them also. If a case is asked, we have to write exactly these words. So definitely you have to remember these all conditions under which a lease can be called as finance lease. Of course, operating lease is a lease which is other than a finance lease. Nothing special about operating lease. Whichever is not a finance lease, that becomes an operating lease. Now coming to the finance lease, of course, which will be the major focus area of AS 19. Finance lease, how to treat a finance lease in the books of the lessee and also in the books of lessor. We will look at that first. First, let us start with the lessee's accounting. Accounting for finance lease in the books of lessee. First point, the leased asset as well as liability for lease should be recognized. When an agreement is signed, one signature is there. Is there any real money coming in, going out because of that signature? No. But still, it is considered to be a transaction according to AS 19, telling that asset also should be recognized. Asset account at R2, liability account has to be passed as an entry. No cash, no nothing. That's only an agreement that is signed, lease agreement. But what type of lease? Finance lease. When a finance lease is entered into, then in the books of lessee, the asset account has to be debited, liability account has to be credited. Both have to be recognized simultaneously. Point is not just that. Entry is simple. Asset account at R2, liability account. Amount, how much? What is the amount at which this entry has to be passed? That should be the lower of these two. Lower of. What are those two? First point, fair value of the leased asset at the inception of the lease. Whatever the fair market value of the asset is there at the inception of the lease, means beginning of the lease. Second, present value of minimum lease payments. Whichever is lower will be the amount at which the asset and liability will be recorded in the books of lessee. What are those two? One is the fair value of the leased asset. Second is present value of minimum lease payments. When we say present value, naturally a discount factor will have to be there. Discount rate should be known to us. What should be the discount rate that should be used for discounting the minimum lease payments? Ideally, it should be discounted at implicit interest rate of lease. Ideally. If it is not available, then incremental borrowing rate of the lessees also can be taken as a discount rate with which present value of minimum lease payments has to be discounted, or the minimum lease payments have to be discounted with which we get the present value of minimum lease payments. So two possible discount rates are there. One is implicit interest rate of lease. That is one thing. Second, if that is not available, if it could not be calculated, then incremental borrowing rate of lessee. Borrowing rate is normally what is the cost of capital for the lessee if he goes and borrows the money outside. That can be taken also. Of course, these have to be given in the question. Sometimes we may be asked to calculate implicit interest rate of lease, which is nothing but IRR calculation. That we will see later. But if it is given already, then that is the rate we have to use to discount what? Minimum lease payments. Once we have minimum lease payments, those lease payments have to be discounted using that implicit interest rate of lease or the incremental borrowing rate of lease, as the case may be. Any one of them can be used. But first priority is definitely implicit interest rate of lease. If that is not available, then incremental borrowing rate of lessee also can be taken for discounting the minimum lease payments. Then naturally question comes, what is the minimum lease payment for the lessee? Important point to be noted. First thing first, total lease rent to be paid by the lessee over the lease term. That means lease rentals definitely are part of minimum lease payments, MLP, plus any guaranteed residual value. Guaranteed residual value means generally that is the residual value which the lessee guarantees to the lessor. Lessee says at the end of the lease term, this much residual value is guaranteed. I will give you that guarantee now. In that case, we call it a guaranteed residual value. So that also will be payment to be done by the lessee to the lessor at the end of the lease term. But will that also form part of minimum lease payments? Yes. So periodic lease payments anyway will be there, which is lease rentals, plus any guaranteed residual value will be called as minimum lease payments. But they themselves will not be useful to us. They have to be discounted using a rate, implicit interest rate of lease or borrowing rate of the lessee. Either of them can be used to discount the minimum lease payments. That present value of minimum lease payment should be compared with the fair value of the leased asset at the inception of the lease. Whichever is lower should be the one at which the asset as well as the liability should be recorded in the books of lessee. That is the first point. When the lease agreement is entered into, then over a period of time, each year accounting what has to be done? Each year, each lease payment has to be apportioned between finance charge and principal amount. That is another important calculation once again, because we know the lease rentals each year, that will definitely include some finance charge also, interest also included in that lease rentals. So our job will be to segregate the principal amount and finance charges. What happens to principal amount? Naturally, that will be reduced from the outstanding liability which is already there, and finance charges will be allocated over the lease term in such a manner that it would produce a constant rate of return on the remaining principal balance. That's what is given, but all these things we cannot actually apply in the problems every time. So simply speaking, finance charges are charged to the P&L account. That is interest, right? Interest has to be charged to the P&L account. How much interest should be calculated like that? In such a manner, they will produce a constant rate of return on the remaining principal balance. So the percentage of interest is supposed to be same on the remaining balances throughout the years. Naturally, it will be same. If not same, we have to find out that same rate, which is nothing but the implicit interest rate of lease. So, calculation is one part. Accounting treatment is another part. Calculation of minimum lease payments will include total lease rentals plus guaranteed residual value. Then that has to be discounted. Then that has to be compared with fair value of the leased asset. Then whichever is lower should be recognized as asset and liability. Then the accounting will come. After first initially the accounting of asset and liability is done, each year what has to be done? Each year liability will get reduced by the principal amount repayment because of lease rental that is being paid, which means, let us say, the amount of lease rent is credited to bank naturally when it is paid. So to bank is common, that is the lease rental, but that lease rental which is paid has to be split into two things. One part is finance charge, one part is principal amount. Principal amount will be debited to the liability. So liability account at R, P&L account at R, or interest account at R to bank will be the entry that will be passed each year when the lease rentals are actually paid. So each lease rental has to be split into two parts. One is the finance charge, another one is principal amount. Entry each year will be what? Simple. Liability account at R or lessor account at R, we can say. Liability is who? Lessor. So lessor account at R, P&L account at R, which is for interest, to bank. That's it. On the other side, we can even say lessor account at R, interest account at R to bank, then P&L account at R to interest account, transferring that expenditure to the debit side of P&L account. Those will be the entries each year that lessee will pass till the lease term is finished. Then, what happens to the asset then? Liability will keep on diminishing when the lease rentals are paid. What happens to the asset which was already debited? That can be depreciated by the lessee as per AS 10. Look at the important point here. Lessee is depreciating the asset. Is he the legal owner of the asset? No. That is another proof that accounting standards take substance over form. Substance over form is applied here. Legal form wise, lessee is not at all the owner of the asset, but still, who can charge depreciation according to AS 10 is lessee. AS 19 tells lessee can charge the depreciation in the books as per AS 10. That is another point to be noted. When it comes to accounting standard 19, depreciation has to be charged by the lessee. So asset will also get depreciated over a period of time. Naturally, entries will be depreciation account at R to asset account, P&L account at R to depreciation account. Of course, if there are any other direct costs which are involved, which are incurred for the finance lease to be initiated, those are also included in the asset under lease, if there are any. If there is any other direct costs which are also involved initially to get this asset under lease through a finance lease, those direct expenses also can be added to the asset. That is always the case. So if any such direct costs are there, those will be added to the asset cost also. That means they will be capitalized, simply speaking. That's it. That is the accounting treatment for finance lease in the books of lessee. Initially, recognition of asset and liability should happen by doing a good calculation of minimum lease payments, then discounting them, then comparing it with fair value. Whichever is lower of that should be recognized as asset and liability. Then each year, liability account will keep on reducing and interest will be charged to the P&L account by segregating the lease payments into two parts. One is finance charge and the other one is original principal amount. On the other side, the asset account will be depreciated in accordance with AS 10. That's all. If any direct expenses are incurred for acquiring this asset under lease, that will be also capitalized and added to the asset cost only, asset debit side only. That's it. These are the various aspects in relation to lessee for finance lease. Finance lease is naturally the one where the calculations will be more. So we should definitely know what constitutes a finance lease very well, and also we should know how to record the transaction of finance lease initially as well as later each year. So that is in the books of lessee accounting for finance lease. Then coming to the lessor, other side. Lessor, actually speaking, the substance of this lease for lessor is a sale. Actually, but again, substance that is. Legally, no. Legally, a lessor himself is the owner even now. But still, the lessor actually what he has done in substance, it is as good as a sale. Then, what should be the treatment in the books of lessor? That is why the lessor should recognize the asset given under finance lease as receivable. It is receivable at an amount equal to net investment in the lease and corresponding credit to sale of asset. Okay, for lessor it may not be a asset, it might be stock. It's a sale, let us say. So what should be the case? It is as good as a normal entry, right? When you sell goods, normally, whoever, forget about lease and all. When somebody sells the goods, what will be the entry? Receivables account at R2, sales. Same entry lessor also will pass. Same entry will pass. But receivable is what? In this case, lessee. So, lessee account data, some money is receivable from lessee to the revenue account. That is asset, we can say in this case. If at all that is asset. If not, that should be taken as sale. Asset is gone. Now, in this, how much can be taken as revenue, how much can be taken as unearned finance income is a very important point. So look at this point of net investment. So what should be the debit here? Net investment in lease, that is nil. Don't think it is zero, not that nil. It is net investment in lease. Same word we have to use. What is net investment in lease? Net investment in lease is nothing but gross investment minus unearned finance income. Unearned finance income. So when it is unearned finance income, naturally to that extent it should be credited also. Unearned finance income we can say. So in this case, if sales is recognized, only we can recognize it to the remaining amount. That is how much? Net investment in lease means gross investment minus unearned finance income. Then both of them have to be defined. What is gross investment? Gross investment is nothing but minimum lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. If you remember, minimum lease payment, that included lease rentals plus guaranteed residual value. So that is anyway there in minimum lease payments. Added to that unguaranteed residual value also, what you get is called as gross investment in lease. Then what is unearned finance income? Unearned finance income is nothing but gross investment in lease, which is basically taken without discounting, minus of present value of gross investment. So gross investment in lease has to be calculated, which is nothing but lease rental plus guaranteed residual value plus unguaranteed residual value. That is gross investment in lease. Take the present value of all of them and deduct it from gross investment in lease. What we get is unearned finance income. In other words, if you just substitute net investment in lease is equal to gross investment minus of unearned finance income means what? Minus of gross investment, once again, minus present value of gross investment. If you take these two out, this becomes plus. So what is the net investment in lease here basically? What is the net investment in lease? That is present value of gross investment. Present value of gross investment has to be taken as receivable and also the sale. So this is the entry that has to be passed in the books of lessor at net investment in lease. So the present value of gross investment to be debited to the lessee account, sales account should be credited or asset account should be credited in the books of lessor. It depends upon what is the nature of asset for him. If it is a stock, then sales account is credited. If that is also an asset for lessor, then asset account is credited, as the case may be. So what is the amount with which this entry has to be passed is basically present value of gross investment. Then what is gross investment? Minimum lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. So first we should find out minimum lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. Then we have to find out present value of that. Deduct the second one from the first one. What we get is net investment in lease. That is called nil or net investment in lease. That is what happens in the books of lessor. The lessor recognizes a receivable as well as sale. Of course, there are many conditions in which the sale cannot be recognized as it is. We don't need to go through each of those conditions. At a general level, broader level, computations wise, if we can compute net investment in lease, that is the main point that we should identify and account for in the books of lessor. In the books of lessee, asset account at R2, liability account. In the books of lessor, lessee account at R2, asset account we can say. These are the entries to be passed in both lessor and lessee books. Then, how the finance income has to be recognized? We have already an unearned finance income, right? That finance income has to be recognized. The lessor should recognize the finance income based on a pattern reflecting a constant periodic return on the net investment outstanding in respect of the finance lease. In simple words, the interest or the finance income, for lessor it is income, that will be recognized in proportion to the outstanding balance receivable from the lease over the lease period. So whatever the outstanding balance is there, on that outstanding balance, same percentage of interest has to be calculated throughout the lease period. That will be recognized as income in the books of lessor. So whatever the money that is receivable from the lessee is one part. Then there is unearned finance income. Then that unearned finance income has to be recognized as and when the lease rentals are received. So let us understand this way. Initially, we pass this entry, lessee account debtor to asset account to unearned finance income account, let us say. Name can be anything else, but nature is that, unearned finance income account. So, this is initial entry that can be passed. Asset account will be what? That will be the net investment in lease, naturally. And unearned finance income is unearned finance income. And naturally, put it together, that will become gross investment in lease. What is gross investment? Net investment plus unearned finance income. So this will be debited with, let us say, gross investment in lease. Right? This entry is passed at the beginning. But each year, when the lease rentals are received, bank account debtor, that is clear, because money will be received. Right? Money is being received each year for sure. To lessee account. So lessee, whatever is supposed to be giving us, he has given us. But point is this completely related to the asset only? No. There is unearned finance income also which is there. That unearned finance income has to be recognized in the profit and loss account. So you can pass this entry called unearned finance income account debtor to P&L account. In other words, it will be credited to the P&L account as income each year when that interest is received from the lessee. Why this money is received from lessee? It is not received only for the asset. It is received for the asset also as well as interest also. So that is why unearned finance income has to be recognized as a real earned finance income each year. Of course, at the end of the period, this unearned finance income account will not have any balance because all that money would have been recognized as revenue over a period of time through the P&L account credit. So these are the entries that can be passed in the books of lessor in the initial recognition, then later in each of the years when the finance income is actually recognized. And how that has to be recognized? It has to be recognized in such a way that it generates a same constant periodic return. That's it. That will be generally the, once again, interest rate implicit on lease, so we don't have to worry about that. But accounting treatment of that is one thing that we should definitely know. Then there is another situation, a case-based point can be asked, contingent rent if it is. If at all, lease rent is fixed on the basis of some contingent item. Contingent means we don't know how much is the lease rent, but lessor will receive the rental from the lessee on the basis of, let us say, percentage of sales or amount of usage, price indices, market rate of interest, whatever the other factor. The rent is not fixed, simple point. The rent is variable on the basis of some reality that will happen in future. Whatever the sales actually the lessee will do, we don't know. But whatever the sales happens, if lessor gets a percentage of sales as his rent, that can be called as contingent rent. Simply speaking, the lease rent is not fixed, but it is based on a factor other than time. Then they shall be recognized as income as and when they accrue. Only then. Then this normal recognition will not happen. Like lessee account at R2 asset account and all should not be recognized. The revenue from such asset should be only recognized as and when that revenue accrues. In other words, as good as operating lease, as good as. As and when they accrue means, really if the sales happen, then only the lessor will receive the rent. No? If sales did not happen, then there is no rent. Or less sales happen, then the rent will be lesser. So it is not something that is fixed. If it is not fixed, the treatment what we have mentioned just now is not valid. This treatment can be done in the books of the lessor and lessee. When we took a look at lessor particularly now, he will recognize contingent rent as and when it really accrues. Before that, he will not recognize it at all. That is another exception to whatever the regular treatment that should happen in the books of lessor. Of course, for lessee it is the same. He has to just take asset account debit and liability account credit. And whatever the amount has to be apportioned, that has to be apportioned. But this is all possible when in the books of lessee or lessor, apportionment, finance charges, when it is possible. It is only possible when the lease rent is fixed. So contingent rent, we can say for convenience purposes, is as good as operating lease, which means if it accrues, then the lessor will recognize it as revenue. If it really has to be payable, then the lessee will recognize it as expenditure, as good as operating lease rentals. So expenditure or income directly will be recognized each year without any initial recognition like this. So that is a special item, not a regular thing. Regularly the calculations, all of that we do, will have these type of steps for lessee as well as lessor. Generally the questions will be asked about compute the amount of asset to be recognized in the books of lessee. What should we do? We should take the minimum lease payments, which is nothing but lease rental plus guaranteed residual value, and then we have to discount them with a discount rate that will be given in the question, which should be ideally the implicit interest rate of lease or the borrowing rate of the lessee, as the case may be. Then that should be compared with fair value of the leased asset. Then whichever is lower is taken as asset as well as liability. Then not only that, sometimes it may be asked to also apportion the finance charges and principal amount for each year. Then in the lease rental of each year, we have to segregate how much is the interest component in that and how much is the principal component in that. Like that, in the books of lessee, questions can be asked. Even not only 5 marks questions, sometimes more number of marks can be awarded for this AS 19. AS 19 has the capability of being asked for even 8 to 10 marks also. Imagine if a question is asked about AS 19 for a lease period of 3 years and writing the entries in all the 3 years. Lot of entries will be there. Initially the asset liability have to be recognized, then finance charges and principal amount have to be segregated, then each year entry has to be passed for payment of lease rentals and debiting the interest also as well as lessor account also, and transferring that interest to the P&L account and providing depreciation on the asset, then transferring that depreciation to P&L account. Like this, periodically the accounting can be asked in the books of lessee for higher number of marks. But if it is only a 5 marks question, generally calculation of present value of minimum lease payments and comparing it with the fair value and finding out whichever is lower of that will be enough calculations in the questions that can be expected from lessee point of view. Lessor point of view, mostly the question will be computation of unearned finance income. Why is that? Because that will have everything. In case of unearned finance income, if you have to calculate, first definitely you have to calculate gross investment, then we have to also calculate present value of gross investment. For that we should know what is gross investment. Gross investment is nothing but lease rentals plus guaranteed residual value plus unguaranteed residual value without discounting. Then discount that, it becomes present value of gross investment. Difference between them is called unearned finance income. That will be asked in general for the books of lessor. And sometimes that unearned finance income, how that has to be recognized in the P&L account each year. There also the same logic. Principal amount, interest amount out of the lease rental has to be segregated. If that segregation happens, the amount of interest that should be recognized in each year can be also asked for a calculation purposes, which will be treated as finance income over the period of lease term in the books of lessor through a credit to P&L account. These are all possible things which can be asked in examination questions from AS 19. And contingent rent and all are exceptional things, those are not normal things. If there is contingent rent, just consider it as good as operating lease. That means no initial recognition and all required. If it accrues, then only income or expenditure, as the case may be, will be recognized. That's it about finance lease. Now coming to operating lease, there is no special thing about operating lease to specially discuss. Operating lease is like taking something on rent. You go to a function hall, for example, they will give chairs on rent for one day. That is operating lease. Normal rentals, whatever the things that we rent for a shorter period of time in general, without any intention of owning that asset at the end of the usage, is generally operating lease. But of course, nothing like that is defined. Finance lease is only defined in AS 19. Any lease other than finance lease is automatically an operating lease. So what will be the treatment for operating lease? For lessor, it will be income. For lessee, it will be expenditure. That's all. There ends the matter. First, let us look at lessor. Of course, the lessor will recognize the asset in the fixed assets column of the balance sheet because he is the owner of the asset, and we are not disturbing that. It is still the lessor's asset only. Lessee is not going to use it for a longer period of time like finance lease. That's why whose books of accounts this asset will be shown in case of operating lease? It will be shown in the books of lessor. Who will be able to charge depreciation? Lessor. For lessor, what is the lease income? Naturally, that is income, and that will be credited to the P&L account. Generally, that will be done through straight line method if there is a more number of years involved. If not, any other method, if it reflects the more systematic allocation of earning derived from the leased out asset, then such approach can be adopted. Depends upon the facts of the case. If any question is given where lease rentals are recognized on the basis of actual output, let us say, then we take actual output as a basis with which the lease rentals from operating lease can be recognized over a period of lease. Not necessarily operating lease is for only days or months, it could be for years also, but it did not fulfill the conditions of finance lease. Then it became operating lease. That is the point. Which means there is a possibility that lease rentals may show a pattern related to some other factor. In that pattern, the lease rentals can be recognized by the lessor. So the point is, normally they are used, they are recognized using straight line method as income naturally for lessor. However, if any other method reflects more systematic allocation of earning of the income, then such method can be also adopted. And if any expenses are there related to the operating lease, they should be recognized in the year in which they are incurred. There is nothing special here. Everything is normal. It is income. Asset is there in the balance sheet. Depreciation is provided by the lessor only. Expenses related to the asset naturally will be borne by the owner and they will be debited to P&L. And if any initial direct cost of the lease are there, they can be expensed immediately also or deferred also. In general, they can be expensed immediately. That is the best way. Or if they want to postpone that, they can treat it as a deferred revenue expenditure also. So that is the possibility for lessor, where he has to just treat the operating lease like a normal rental income. He owns the asset, he is leasing that asset, getting some rental income. That's it. That rental income is recognized on the credit side of P&L account. Any expenses related to them can be debited to the P&L account. That is operating lease. Nothing special. All are just normal commonsensical points for accounting of operating lease in the books of lessor. What about lessee? Again same. For lessee, what is operating lease? Payments, expenditure. For lessor, it would be income. For lessee, it would be expenditure. So for lessee, it will be recognized as an expense in the profit and loss account, naturally on a straight line basis over the lease term. If any method is more representative of the time pattern of the user's benefit, then such method can be used. Normally straight line basis over the lease term. If any other method is more reflective, more representative of the pattern of usage, then such method can also be used. That option is there for lessee also, lessor also. But that will be only there if it is evident that such a systematic allocation and systematic recognition would be better. How do we know that? If the question says that, then only we know that. Otherwise, simply the operating lease rentals are incomes of the lessor, expenses of the lessee. That's it. That is about operating lease. Now another very important point, and we can say questions wise, couple of times they were asked also earlier, sale and lease back transactions. What is the transaction? First we should understand. Sale and lease back. So sale is happening. So sale is happening and the seller has sold it to some buyer, let us say, and buyer will lease it back to the seller only. So what the seller has become now, seller is also the lessee and buyer has become lessor. So sale and lease back can happen. In general, from a financial management point of view, this is a kind of source of finance, particularly when the seller is in distress. Just for practical purposes, taking an example of Nokia, prior to it was being taken over by Microsoft, when that company was going through lot of financial distress, it had sold the head office of Nokia, that building, corporate office building, Nokia sold it. Sold it means they did not vacate it. No, they cannot. They have to still continue their business. So what do? They sell it first at naturally a price which will be a lump sum amount. So suddenly lot of money comes to the seller. Then, because they don't want to vacate that also, they will lease it back from the buyer. So the buyer becomes lessor, seller becomes lessee. That is a sale and lease back transaction. What should happen in such cases? How should be the treatment in such cases is a very important discussion. Questions can very well be asked from this also. They have been asked. They were asked earlier exams. Sale and lease back transaction. As the name indicates, it involves the sale of an asset by the vendor and leasing of the same asset back to the vendor. That's the sale and lease back in a simple terms. But what should happen in the case of finance lease? In the case of finance lease, any profit or loss of the sale proceeds over the carrying amount should not be immediately recognized as profit or loss in the financial statements of a seller lessee. Seller lessee are same. So what should happen then? It should not be recognized. It means what should happen? It should be deferred and amortized over the lease term in proportion to the depreciation of the leased asset. That is the main point. So if there is a profit or loss that has arisen out of the sale, asset is gone, ownership wise it is gone, and it has come back, right? When it has come back and it is a finance lease, so possibilities are less. Even if it is there, accounting wise again the lessee seller has to record it in the books of accounts now as an asset. The point is not about that. Accounting will happen as a lessee, that to a finance lease lessee. But when the sale happened, profit or loss is there. What should happen to that profit or loss? None of them should be recognized immediately. It is not something to be recognized immediately. It has to be recognized over a period of time in the proportion of depreciation of the leased asset. How do we know the depreciation of leased asset? Naturally, lessee only will provide depreciation, right, in case of finance lease. So what are the depreciation that he provides in the books of accounts as a lessee? In that proportion, the gain or loss that resulted from the sale of original asset has to be recognized over a period of time, but not immediately. That is a important point to be noted. Why is that? Logic, if you understand, if this provision is not there, people might just show some kind of profit or loss according to their whims and fancies. If they wanted to impress the investors, they will show higher profits. If they wanted to avoid tax, they will show lower profits. Both of them they will do. Forget about tax for some time. The profits or losses can be manipulated by just selling an asset and leasing it back in the form of finance lease. Asset has not moved, the seller has not moved out of the asset, is there only, is using the asset only, he is still providing depreciation according to AS 19, and actually effectively nothing happened. He sold and almost bought back. Almost. Why? Because it is a finance lease. In finance lease, though it is not called as a purchase, still there are a lot of indications that it is as good as a purchase. So then why is he doing that? Why is he selling and buying it back? Because he wants to show some profit now. He wants to book the profit now. Ultimately, there may not be much difference between what he has sold and what he has received now and what he has to pay in future. Effectively means, for the essence of the transaction, nothing happened, to be frank. He has given something and he has taken something with a postponement of the payments, that's all. So, for the lessee in finance lease, basically he wants to book some profit immediately because of the sale transaction, and that sale transaction definitely gives profit in general, let us say, because the book value of that asset may be very less and that asset can be sold at a high price. Immediately, if that profit is recognized, they can inflate their profits like that. That should not be allowed. Why? Because in essence, if you look at the transaction, this is only sale and buyback also, as good as, though it is called lease back, as good as buyback. So sale and buyback, but payment is not done for purchase now. Payment for that will happen in future. So what the lessee is effectively doing is booking profits now, postponing expenses to future. So that can happen if this is not there. That is why it should not be allowed. That is the main reason why this type of treatment is provided in AS 19. If the lease is a finance lease, that is lease back, and the seller lessee cannot recognize the profit or loss on sale immediately, only possibility is that he has to amortize it, defer it, and charge it either to the debit side or credit side of the P&L account in proportion to the depreciation of the leased asset over the lease term. That is the finance lease situation in case of sale and lease back. Actually, for sale and lease back transactions in exam questions also, finance lease is straightforward. No recognition, postpone the recognition. Simple. But for operating lease, it is more important because there are many options which are possible scenarios. Operating lease, lease back. Operating lease normal treatment is nothing. Lessor will treat the operating lease rentals as income. Lessee will treat them as expenses. So that is not a big deal about operating lease recognition. But operating lease, where the importance will come, sale and lease back transaction. Sale happened and lease back is happening as an operating lease, not as a finance lease. Then there are possibilities, many of them, and all of them can be asked as questions. Those were asked as questions also earlier. Let us look at this. If any profit or loss is arising out of the sale transaction, it is recognized immediately when the sale price is equal to the fair value. So if sale price is equal to the fair value, then there is no problem. Whatever the profit or loss arising out of such transaction, that is recognized immediately. That means there is no malintention also in that. The sale happened at fair value. So whatever the profit or loss is there, that should be recognized immediately when the sale price is equal to fair value of that asset. And we should understand one point always. When we say profit or loss, what is profit or loss? That is nothing but sale price minus carrying amount of that asset in the books of accounts, right? That is profit or loss. So the carrying amount, sale price, fair value. Three items are there to be compared. If sale price is equal to fair value, whatever the profit or loss, that is recognized immediately, no problem in that case. However, what if the sale price is below fair value? This is another important point. Sale price is below fair value. Then also we cannot actually say there is a malintention, because as the seller could be in a distress, he can sell it at a lower price than fair value. We cannot say there is malintention, but we have to check whether such profit or loss is going to be recognized immediately or it has to be postponed over a period of time. So if sale price is below fair value, then if it is profit, then the profit should be recognized immediately. If it is profit, then there is no problem. The profit should be recognized immediately. Why is that? Because the sale price is already below the fair value. If the seller wanted to inflate his profits, why would he sell at below fair value? He would have sold at above fair value, just to show that higher sale and higher profit. So there is no malintention if there is profit. We have to understand that. Nobody will tell that. So definitely the profit that is resulting from this will have to be recognized immediately. But on the other side, loss, if there is, loss will happen when the carrying amount is more than the sale value, or sale value is less than the carrying amount. Then loss will happen. Then the loss has to be recognized immediately only when provided the loss is not compensated by the future lease payment. That we have to check. That is difficult for us to check. In reality, if it is checked, if future lease payments are not compensating this loss, then also the loss can be recognized immediately. But what if the future lease payments are compensating this loss? Then the loss has to be deferred and amortized. When is that? If that loss is compensated by future lease payment. So now the one who is a seller, a lessee, he might agree to pay higher lease rentals to counter this loss that he has incurred. So if it is compensated by the future lease payment, he might say, I will pay lesser amounts, or he can say he will pay higher amounts. For example, if an asset is already having a value of 100 lakhs in the books of accounts, that is the carrying amount, and actual sale value is less than that, let us say 80 only, right? 80 only, this is what sale value we can say, 80 lakhs. So there is a loss of 20 lakhs. 20 lakhs loss is there, that is going to be incurred by lessee. Maybe he will reduce this 20 lakhs from the future lease payments. So now he will receive only 80 lakhs as sale value. In future, he will get a benefit of 20 lakhs anyway by paying lesser lease amounts to the lessor, lower lease amounts to the lessor. Like that, this loss can be compensated in future. If it is compensated like that, in that case, we cannot recognize this loss immediately. That has to be deferred and amortized over a period of time. If not, it is a genuine thing. That means there is no compensation of this loss that is going to happen in the lease rentals in future. Lease rentals are all genuine. Then whatever the loss that is arising, 20 lakhs, can be recognized immediately. So that depends upon whether the loss is going to be compensated by future lease payments or not. How do we know that? We don't know that. We have to write that in the answer, that's all. So if a treatment is asked, we have to write that if the loss is compensated by future lease payments, then it can be recognized over a period of time by deferring and amortizing the loss. If that loss is not compensated by the future lease payments, then only such loss can be recognized immediately. If it is profit, it can be recognized immediately. When is that? If sale price is below the fair value. If the sale price is below the fair value, then the profit has to be recognized immediately. Loss has to be recognized immediately only if the loss is not compensated by future lease payments. Simple. Otherwise, the loss has to be amortized over a period of time. Now the main thing comes, that is sale price above fair value. Sale price, if it is above fair value, why would it be? It would be generally the case because the lessee will pay that amount which he has received now as an excessive sale price above fair value in the form of lease rentals in future to the lessor. So that is what we assume, not that really it will happen. With that in mind, with that kind of possibility in mind, whenever sale price is above fair value, what should we do is, we have to check whether there is profit or loss. And if the carrying amount is equal to the fair value, sale price is above fair value, but carrying amount is equal to the fair value, that will result in profit. naturally, that profit has to be amortized over the lease period. Why it will result in profit? Because carrying amount is equal to fair value. Sale price is above the fair value means it is automatically above the carrying amount also. That profit has to be amortized over the lease period. That is straightforward, guaranteed. However, other possibilities are also there. Carrying amount is less than fair value. Sale price is above fair value. Carrying amount is less than fair value. So when carrying amount is less than fair value, sale price is above fair value, definitely that will result in also profit. So to whatever extent that profit is related to the sale price less fair value, that has to be amortized and the balance profit has to be recognized immediately. So in this case, if the carrying amount is less than fair value but sale price is above fair value, then naturally there will be profit. But there are two things here. So there is sale price which is above fair value and carrying amount, carrying value let us say, which is below fair value. Carrying amount is less than fair value. So point is, difference between these two, which is what? Sale price less fair value. Simple logic. Any sale price above fair value, we don't call it as genuine. We don't think it is genuine. If it is not genuine, we cannot recognize immediately. So what we will do? Defer and amortize over the period of time. Difference between these two is genuine. So this can be recognized immediately. That can be credited to P&L account. What is that? Difference between fair value and carrying amount. But any amount received as a sale value over and above fair value is as good as not genuine. We have to assume like that. Yes, 19th intention is that. It will not tell all this. But if we understand that, application of this becomes easier. Over and above fair value, if sale price is there, that amount is not genuine. That will have to be deferred and amortized, guaranteed. Whatever the remaining is there, remaining will have to be treated according to the other points given. So in this case, remaining is profit. So that profit will be treated as credit to the P&L. Then another possibility is also there. Carrying amount is more than fair value. So this is another possibility. So here first point is selling price is above fair value and carrying amount also is more than fair value. So carrying amount is somewhere in between selling price and fair value. Then what? Then there is a loss to the extent that is related to carrying amount less fair value should be recognized immediately. Carrying amount and fair value, this difference should be recognized as loss immediately, and profit that is equal to selling price less fair value, this should be deferred and amortized. That's what happens when carrying amount is more than fair value but selling price is also more than fair value. If that is the case, difference between carrying amount and fair value has to be recognized in the P&L account as loss immediately, and the profit which is equivalent to the difference between selling price and fair value should be amortized. That's it. These are the various aspects that can happen in the case of sale and lease back transactions. If it is a finance lease, always defer and amortize. There is nothing like immediate recognition for finance lease. If it is operating lease and sale price fair value are equal, there is no problem for us. We will recognize it immediately. But if sale price is below fair value also, in general there is no problem. If it is profit, recognize immediately. Loss also recognize immediately. But only thing we have to check is whether this loss is going to be compensated or not. If it is so, then that cannot be recognized immediately. It has to be deferred and amortized. So if the sale price is equal to fair value or below fair value, we don't have any doubt on that transaction, except when there is a loss, and that too when that loss is compensated by future lease payments. But when the sale price is above fair value, then something is wrong. Why that sale price is above fair value? They wanted to show higher profits. So we should not allow that. How can we not allow that? by saying that if carrying amount and fair value are same, then the profit over and above the carrying amount or fair value, as the case may be, shall not be recognized immediately. That should be amortized over the lease period. On the other side, if carrying amount is less than fair value, then the profit, to the extent that is related to difference between selling price and fair value, that should be always amortized, and difference between fair value and carrying amount should be treated as profit. That should be recognized in the P&L account immediately. But a variety case may be there also, where carrying amount is more than fair value and sale price is also more than fair value. That means carrying value is somewhere between selling price and fair value. Then what? Then whatever the loss that is resulting because of carrying amount and fair value difference, that should be recognized immediately, and the profit which is equivalent to the difference between selling price and fair value has to be amortized. So always difference between selling price and fair value, if the sale price is above fair value, has always to be amortized. That is guaranteed. Remaining thing is what? That might change. Sometimes it could be profit, sometimes it could be loss. If that is loss also, it should be recognized immediately. If it is profit also, it should be recognized immediately. That is remaining thing. But difference between selling price and fair value is always amortized and deferred. If selling price is above fair value, that is where we can say AS 19 doubts such a transaction, and naturally to prevent that kind of inflating the profits cannot be recognized immediately. They have to be deferred and amortized over the lease period when sale price is above the fair value. So sale price above fair value, sale price below fair value, sale price equal to fair value. These are the three possibilities under operating lease. And finance lease anyway is always defer and amortize. There is nothing to be recognized immediately in case of finance lease. Let us apply this operating lease question particularly for understanding purposes. EA Limited sold machinery having a written down value of 40 lakhs, that means that is book value or carrying amount you can call it, to B Limited for 50 lakhs. This is sale value. And the same machinery was leased back by B Limited to A Limited, so it is definitely a lease back, sale and lease back, and it is an operating lease. As I told you, sale and lease back questions are more important in operating lease, because in finance lease there are many options, only one option, always defer amortize. So where there is question there, question is not possible. So if it is operating lease only, multiple options are possible. So if it is operating lease and there is a sale and lease back transaction, comment if various scenarios. Sale price of 50 lakhs is equal to fair value. We have to understand, don't try to by heart it, it will be confusing. If you understand it, it will be easier. Sale price equal to fair value, first of all, is it a problem? No problem. When sale price is equal to fair value, we don't have any problem with that. That means any profit or loss can be definitely recognized immediately without any problem. Then comes whether it is profit or loss. Book value 40 lakhs, sale value 50 lakhs. That means there is a profit of 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs profit to be recognized immediately. That's it. That is the treatment for first case. 10 lakhs profit has to be credited to the P&L immediately, because there is no problem. Sale price is equal to fair value. We are not doubting it. That is a genuine profit. That can be recognized immediately in the P&L account. Then, second scenario. Fair value is 60 lakhs. That means fair value is more than sale price, or sale price is less than fair value. Then also there is no problem actually. The problem comes only when sale price is more than fair value. Then we get a doubt. Why is it more than fair value? Do we want to inflate our profits or what? If this is not the case, we don't have to worry about it. Even in that case, if there is a profit also, that profit will be recognized immediately. So same treatment. 10 lakhs profit will be recognized immediately in the P&L account. Why? Because it's a profit. If it is a loss, then we'll think and we'll see whether that loss is going to be compensated in the future lease payments or what. If it is a profit in this case, that can be very much recognized immediately. How much is the profit? 10 lakhs, same profit. Only fair value changed, sale price did not change. So these are two questions. Now, sale price and fair values are also changing. Observe them very carefully. Point number C. Carrying amount is different. Carrying amount how much? That is 40 lakhs. That is no change in that. Fair value is different. Fair value is 45 lakhs. Then sale price is 38 lakhs. This is the situation. That is point number C. First, take the facts carefully. Carrying amount 40 lakhs is common in all cases. Fair value and sale price are changing. Fair value is 45 lakhs. Sale price is 38 lakhs. First of all, is it profit or loss? First of all, that you should check. Carrying amount 40, selling price 38 means 2 lakhs loss. That is clear. Then we have to check whether fair value is equal to selling price or more than or less than that. And we have always problem when selling price is more than fair value, that is where we have problem. If selling price is less than fair value or selling price is equal to fair value, we don't have problem. Now in this case what? Selling price is less than fair value, but there is a loss. So it should be recognized immediately. 2 lakhs loss should be recognized immediately only when we have to write just a condition, only writing that. What condition is that? Provided this loss is not compensated by future lease payments. That's all. But treatment is same. It should be recognized immediately, but comes with a condition since it is a loss. If it was a profit like point B, then there was no condition. For loss in this scenario, there is a condition that has to be just written. We cannot check that condition because we don't know what are the future lease payments. So we have to just write that 2 lakhs loss should be recognized in the P&L account immediately, provided the loss is not compensated in future lease payments. That was point number C. 5 marks question this is. Quite possible to be asked, a very similar question. Each one gets 1 mark. You have to just show the calculations and write the treatment. Then point number D. See, carrying amount is still the same. Carrying amount is still 40. Then fair value is how much? 40 lakhs also. Then sale price is 50 lakhs. First point, what is this? Profit or loss? There is a profit of 10 lakhs. That is first point you should identify. First point, carrying amount 40 lakhs. Sale price 50 lakhs. That means there is a profit of 10 lakhs. Correct? When there is a profit of 10 lakhs, then we have to also check what about the sale price and fair value. When there is a sale price which is higher than fair value, see this, that is where we have a problem, right? When there is a sale price which is higher than fair value, then what should we do? We should not recognize that profit immediately. That should be deferred and amortized over the period of lease term. So 10 lakhs profit, not P&L account. It should be deferred and amortized over the period of lease term. That is the treatment. But at the same time, we have to also check whether the fair value is equal to the carrying amount or more than carrying amount or less than carrying amount. In this case, fair value is equal to the carrying amount. So deferred and amortization automatically fully 10 lakhs has to be deferred and amortized. Then next point. Fair value is 46 lakhs, sale price is 50 lakhs. Another scenario. Once again, keep the numbers first, then you can write the amounts. 40 is there, 40 is the lowest, 46 is there, and 50 is there. Okay. What each of them write it? Sale price is 50, then 46 is fair value, then 40 is the carrying amount. Okay. So here, first of all, profit or loss? Profit, 10 lakhs. But can that entire profit be amortized or can that entire profit be recognized? No, it cannot be. Why? Because our problem is only to the extent where sale price is more than fair value. Our problem is not the other things. So this is our problem. Sale price to the extent it is more than fair value, that means 4 lakhs profit should be deferred and amortized, and this 6 lakhs profit should be recognized immediately. So 6 lakhs to be recognized immediately P&L account, 4 lakhs profit should be deferred and amortized over the lease term. That is the answer for E bit. Then F bit. Once again, better to write the numbers in the sequence, then you can see where it is fitting. Subse lowest is fair value 35, then there is 39, then there is 40. This is carrying amount. 39 is sale value, sale price, and fair value is 35. These are the three things. So once again, what is our problem? Our problem is sale price more than fair value is our problem. So to the extent of 4 lakhs, which is loss, that has to be deferred and amortized. And look at the difference between carrying amount and fair value, that is 5 lakhs. Sorry, 1 minute. What is the basic final profit or loss? Carrying amount is 40, selling price is 39. That means 1 lakh loss is there. See, 1 lakh loss is there. First of all, that is clear. When 1 lakh loss is there, 4 lakhs profit can be deferred and amortized, and 5 lakhs loss can be recognized immediately. So what is our problem that should be deferred and amortized is excess of selling price over fair value, which is 4 lakhs. That is our problem. But other thing is what? 5 lakhs. So we can say in this way, ultimately there should be a loss of 1 lakh, that is for sure. So the loss of 5 lakhs has to be recognized immediately. 5 lakhs loss that should be recognized immediately, and 4 lakhs profit should be deferred and amortized. That is the final treatment of F point. And effectively what? 5 lakhs profit, 4 lakhs loss means 1 lakh loss. That is ultimately the final loss. But it is not going to happen in one shot. 1 lakh loss is not just recognized in one shot. 5 lakhs loss is recognized immediately, and the profit of 4 lakhs will have to be deferred and amortized. So that is the treatment for F point. Like this, in operating lease, particularly when there is a sale and lease back. So different possibilities are there, and in each possibility one question can be definitely there. So that's what we have done here. Using those possibilities, how much has to be recognized as profit or loss immediately and how much has to be deferred and amortized is the ultimate answer. Either it will be profit and loss account recognition or deferred and amortized. Answer has to be written clearly. How much is the amount of profit or loss and what is the treatment. These are the various cases for sale and lease back in relation to operating lease. With that, we can say that the core aspects related to the finance lease and operating lease have been discussed. Of course, the problems related to them in detail for computational things we have to do, that we will do in the next session. But prior to that, let us also just focus on this particular word, computation of what is the interest rate implicit on lease. Sometimes questions can be given on that also. It is basically nothing but IRR calculation. Whatever is the interest rate implicit on lease is nothing but that discount rate at which the aggregate present value of the minimum lease payments under a finance lease from the lessor standpoint and any unguaranteed residual value accruing to the lessor will be equal to the fair value of the leased asset. So from a lessor point of view, minimum lease payments means what? Once again same, lease rentals plus guaranteed residual value plus unguaranteed residual value also. So the present value of all this, if it is equal to the fair value of the asset at which rate of discount, that is called as interest rate implicit on lease. That we have to find out naturally by using trial and error method, which is nothing but IRR, internal rate of return, from this lease to the lessor. From the lessor's point of view, whatever is IRR that this lease generates, that is what is interest rate implicit on lease. So computation of interest rate on implicit on lease is nothing but computation of IRR. How to calculate IRR? That we should know from financial management. But of course, application of that will be there in Accounting Standard 19 also. Problems related to them we will do in the next session. But as far as theoretical and conceptual aspects are concerned, these are the core aspects of AS 19 which have to be remembered very well, and they have to be understood as well as applied when we solve the problems in the next session. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.